My school never offered photography, so we had art, but I was always hopeless at drawing, so I assumed that I would be a terrible artist. A parent had left a camera behind at one of the theatre productions that we'd done, and it never got claimed, and I just said to the drama teacher, if no one claims that missing camera, can I have it? And he said, yeah, sure, and no one claimed it. And so then I had my first camera. It was like this lost property camera. And I just sort of got into taking pictures, and I remember thinking at that point, like, oh, I'm going to be a photographer. But then, yeah, then I sort of forgot about it, you know, for a lot of years, yeah, and went on to do social work. You know, I mean, I don't think any of my friends or anything thought it was a particularly cool or great idea. My parents didn't really encourage me or say that it was a fantastic idea. I remember my dad was like, oh, you know, if you become a social worker, you'll just be handing out dole checks at Centrelink and, you know, that's all you'll be doing every day. So I've sort of wanted to work with the people who are sort of the most marginalised or the most in need. I sort of was conscious of how privileged I was. I don't know, it was very much my own choice, and I just felt an urge. I finished my degree and then went overseas to the US, and I ended up spending a year working there on luxury yachts with the super rich and famous, and just cruising around on their boats, and I sort of faked my way into becoming a chef for them. But I was avidly travelling and taking a lot of photographs, and it was when I met in Canada a guy called Lung Lu who was doing really beautiful documentary work, and he encouraged me to do more social documentary sort of work, and that was when I really started concentrating on photography. And I was living in, you know, Canada and the US. They don't sound like wildly exotic or exciting places, but I think that, you know, I found those niches that sort of still reflected that social conscience that I had in these places. So I started photographing in Vancouver in the downtown east side, which is just completely forgotten about. Something like 90% of the population in that suburb is living way below the poverty line, and I think there was sort of 5,000 injection drug users in a 10-block radius, and the leading cause of death is overdose, and it's just this apocalyptic mess. I sort of like the term documentary because you can work on long-term stories that aren't necessarily spot news related, so it doesn't have to be where the event is or at the time that the event happens. You can sort of follow the aftermath of things, or look at how culture inflicts on the way people live or how they choose to live. So you can sort of take more of a subtle look and look at things outside of where the news media sits. And they're often really important stories that need to be told but that lack mainstream news focus. I'm still working in that journalistic sort of style. I mean, really amazing photojournalism can create policy change in politics and really create cultural shifts in ideas. But at the same time, I think you have to just remain a little bit dislocated from that and realise that you're there to document. Going to Haiti was completely different, say, to the work I did in the US with marginalised communities, because they're such different situations. It was probably the most shocking thing I've ever seen. I've never experienced poverty like that, and I've travelled through, you know, bits of Asia and Central America. It was just a whole new level, because the people there had nothing before the earthquake and now they really have nothing. It was shocking, but you make a routine and it becomes very day to day, and you sort of get over that shock, and it's just like, oh, how do I get from A to B? And oh, I need to be here at this time to speak to this person and get a picture. And it's sort of almost what you do here. You know, you're working for a greater good, and that we're, you know, essentially privileged people, and it does make you feel good, like you can do something in the world, and like you're acknowledging your position of power in the world by being born a Western person. And, you know, that is rewarding. You get reward out of sort of trying to do something for people less privileged than you. And there's always a relationship where you're, you know, helping people tell their story, and I think that can be really powerful. But working with, say, the marginalised people in developed countries like in Canada and the US and Australia, a lot of it has focused on addiction, mental illness, poverty, and these are sort of things that I've had like close encounters with, or I've grown up understanding in my own family. And while we're not marginalised, we still suffer these same problems. So I think when you do work, it's often, if it's going to be good work, it usually comes from a place that you understand to some capacity. So whenever I work with these people, I can relate to them as a human, because I don't see them as so far different from, a family member of my own, even though they might look completely different because they've had a different set of circumstances that have led them to live a much harder life. I guess I can bring in my own understanding of those sort of problematic issues and then relate to them on that level. Yeah, so you're always infusing what you know about the world and trying to relate to people on a level, and it's always about a connection. You want to build a good connection. But I mean, often when I work, whether it's in, no matter where it is, often it's just, a bit of humour and having a good time. And I think people don't always want to feel like you feel sorry for them, So you can just, usually I just go in and sort of muck around and hang out and just connect as a human. Well, I got the Magnum Inge Morath award, which granted me some money to continue working on marginalised communities in developed countries. So I'm going to continue working in that theme and look at a community in Australia and try and build like a three-piece series. So what I shot in Canada, what I shot in the US, and then make the final piece in Australia, looking at a similar sort of community that suffering marginalisation and poverty and addiction. In the one in Australia, I want to look at just that relationship between, society's responsibilities to its citizens and then its citizens' personal freedoms and choices. I kind of like looking at those polar extremes. Yeah, I sort of saw it as sort of a horrific and romantic landscape, polarised almost in the way that they saw themselves as compared to the way a regular person might look upon the situation. The image that I won the Iris for was my first attempt at doing documentary work. That was my first sort of thought of maybe I should try and tell a story with my pictures rather than just take pictures. Some artists, really embed in themselves, I'm a black and white artist or I'm a colour artist, and I kind of like choosing for the situation. But I think it's also nice not to make a grim subject grimmer. Often they're people's lives and they're doing their best to have a happy life, even if it's a challenging one. And when you paint it all in black and white, it just sort of takes any joy out of it, out of life. I don't know. I don't mind if it's a good or a bad reaction. I just want to tell my own story, and I don't expect everyone to like it. The people I photograph are very aware that I'm photographing them and what I'm doing, and they're aware of their own situation and their own lives, and, they want their story told, so they're not wanting me to paint a certain picture of them and I think that's when you find the best relationships and you get the best photos, is when you have people who are willing to be shown sometimes in not the most flattering lights, but who just appreciate that storytelling ability of photographs. I only want a mutually beneficial relationship. It's been an evolution. I've only been doing this since 2007, and even then I wasn't a professional photographer, I was just taking pictures. So I think you learn and grow as you photograph and as you embed yourself in the industry more and more, and you receive more professional criticism, right, which is always a really good thing. Hearing what other people say has helped me develop my own critical approach to the way I work. It helps you reevaluate what you're doing in a positive way, because you begin to understand more about your practice, and that can only benefit you. Online, you get a lot of feedback. And I think it's just a reflection on the type of person who's looking at the pictures. And it's really interesting. It's mostly like reasonably privileged people looking at the work, I guess. You get some people, like, say there's the picture of the woman bathing naked, like out in the hot spring, and she's got no teeth and she's naked and she's in quite this like sort of sexy like pose. And so I've seen some people write comments like, oh my God, I just vomited in my mouth, and things like that. And then you get other people that go, wow, oh my God, she looks so beautiful, like so comfortable in her skin. And it's just a reflection on the viewer, really. On how they see the world and on their own opinions. You get all types in this world, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So